Welcome to season 3 of the Iceman Kicking Podcast. My name is Brett Arkelian. Kick your feet up, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Iceman Kicking Podcast.
It's one of the biggest mistakes that coaches make.
Number one, you got to be like yourself, man. You know, like being true to yourself is just so valuable.
Welcome to the Iceman Kicking Podcast. It's the show with cold guests and even cooler questions. And I'm here with one of the GOATs in the kicking game. He's been a coach. He's been a Broyles Award nominee, and he's also been an assistant head coach at multiple schools, and someone who holds a place near and dear to my heart because he spoke when I was getting into it and learning. We have Coach Justin Lustig of the Vanderbilt Commodores. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm great, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm freaking fired. As we talked about, I've been waiting for this episode, and I know you're busy and I'm busy too, and so I've been able to really do some research and listen to a lot of episodes and falling asleep on the plane, and I could nod back and hear talking about Lake Erie in Pennsylvania, and so yeah, that's pretty cool. Hey, we like to start our sections now with a new segment brought to you by the Kicker's Bible. Would that be okay? Can we do that?
That's great.
Okay. This section is called Heavy Hitters. So instead of getting into your background, which is great in the days of viral clips and all that, you kind of have to start with the heavy hitters. Now, for me, I'm a young coach who has high aspirations of being a special teams coordinator and a head coach. Well, you've done all those things. What is the first thing that you have to start focusing on or planning when you become a head coach? Because there's so many different responsibilities and stuff you can do. Like, where do you even start with that, Coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's cliche to, you hear the cliche of you're never going to be ready for it until you start doing it, and that's absolutely true. However, I think as you mentioned your goals, those were my goals as a young coach, and you're always in the back of your mind thinking at all your stops and all the people that you learn from, taking the things that you like, and maybe the things that you don't like, and starting like a little notebook. And I did that of how I would want to run things if I had the opportunity. So I think just taking the time to think about it is the first thing I would say. And then, and again, this is another cliche, but just being yourself and really taking time to sit down and write down the things that you believe in, from a big program perspective, or even as a position coach or a coordinator level. I think those things are important and oftentimes get overlooked. But I remember as a young coach, maybe like just stealing stuff from people, and which is common and nothing wrong with that. But even just from a philosophy standpoint, just like stealing stuff and going into an interview and maybe like, I'm going to use these things that I learned, instead of like really taking the time to like just go hole up in a library somewhere or in my office and, what do I really believe in? What do I really think matters? I think that's really important that you stay true to yourself.
Yeah, I could definitely see that too from my perspective. I'm kind of in that where I'm like, okay, I like this, but it's not until recently I really try to start sculpting things that, fashion after I really believe it. So to kind of detail that, and for those who don't know, you become the head coach of Edinboro in 2016. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I liked how you talked about too that in a couple different podcasts and stuff, it's a Division II conference, but shoot, man, is it competitive? I played at Lincoln University, which is in Pennsylvania, and we played Cheney in the PSAC.
Yep. And
we had some competitive games there, but holy crap, I'd watch some of those PSAC games, and those guys are on another level. Yeah. You talked about some of those guys could play at that next level. So when you're becoming the head coach at Edinboro, what are some of your values, or what were some things that you ended up coming up with that you're like, what, this really matters to me, or these are the first steps I'm going to take becoming a head coach?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to articulate some of those things, but I think it started for me with like two things, like just discipline and effort. Those are the two things I really wanted to establish right away. So defining what that means to guys, and then also just like starting like lists of things that are actionable items that go with those things, right? Like, so, it's easy to just talk about, we're going to be disciplined and we're going to be playing with total effort. So like defining total effort, right? It's the start for us. It's the start, the middle, the finish, and the return. And that's what it is here at Vanderbilt. And it's, how do you start a drill? Your hands behind the line, the discipline of that. The middle is the fight and how you're grinding through that drill. The finish is how you're finishing, 1 yard past the finish line. And then the return, how you're returning to the back of the line. Are you recycling positive energy? And then constantly like showing the players, what that means. And so you're videoing your off-season workouts and just detailing up all those things that are important to you. And then to me, like discipline, how you do everything or anything is how you do everything. And I know those are cliches, but as long as you're talking about it and you're showing them examples constantly, that's what's really important to me. And then the third thing I would say is just like being a true team and putting the team ahead of yourself. Those were like the three things I would say that we really hung our hat on from the beginning. And but man, there was a lot. Then we took over a program that was on, I believe it was a 16-game losing streak. So there was a lot of things to work on and to get better at. And that was one of the most fun years of my coaching career, though, is that year at Edinboro.
Yeah, I remember hearing you talk about the motion and the joy on your kids' faces when you guys won that first game.
They were they hadn't won a game the previous season. So we went in and we ended up going 9-2. It was the biggest turnaround in college football at the time. I think Tulane just actually beat that with a 10-win turnaround this year. So that first game, just getting that win, that it was our first win in the first game of the season to break a 16-game losing streak. And man, that was the tipping point for sure. You just felt so much more buy-in to that, man, what we're doing right now is working. And that was key to that kind of, we hung our hat on that win throughout the entire season.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny too. I think of a trivia and stuff like that. I mean, that would be a good trivia game, guessing all the PSAC names of the teams. Like, who'd you guys?
Yeah, for sure.
Who'd you guys beat in that first game? Who was it?
Well, we actually played out of conference.
Okay.
We played St. Joe's in Indiana, and that was at St. Joe's in Indiana. So long bus ride. I don't miss those bus rides, and some of those hotels that you stayed in and stopping at Orion's or some kind of place to have a pregame meal. And certainly a lot different in the SEC.
Yeah, some type of buffet, right? Or some Golden Corral. Right? That's what I remember from playing in that conference or in the CIAA for 2 years. It's like every game was an 8-hour bus ride.
Yeah.
You're eating chicken, fried chicken the night before a game. And you're like, I don't know if it's going to help us, but it's going to fuel us. So.
For sure. Yeah, no, I remember one story. We were playing Clarion, and we didn't have the money to stay overnight, and it was about a 2-hour bus ride, so it wasn't horrible, but it was a noon game, so you had to we were meeting at the facility at like 5:30 in the morning, and then we're going to do a pregame meal on our way down, and we had it set up at a place called Eaton Park, which is a Western PA kind of Golden Corral kind of place, Ryan's Steakhouse buffet. And we had it, one of our coaches was supposed to have it set up where we were, sectioned off in our own area, and we get there and they're not ready for us. And, there's, I think the youngest person in the restaurant was probably like 72. But we're eating our pregame meal around all these people. And I'm thinking, man, this is not good. Our guys aren't focused. And then we go out and we get up like 28-0 in the first like 2 minutes of the game, and we're playing our butts off and playing really well. And it just makes you think like how much is how important is that stuff?
Maybe every game you guys need to eat with senior citizens.
Yeah. I'll try to convince Clark to.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll be
take us to Eaton Park or Golden Corral.
Yeah,
or play Florida.
And that was the other thing. Yeah, there's a lot of them there that I like to talk about too, is the difference between smaller school and you coach at Christopher Newport. Is that right?
Yeah.
School too. But just like you were talking about with like filming the off-season drills and all that stuff, I'm sure that is a big, along with the roles. What what was one of the weirdest roles that you had coaching small school ball, whether it was washing clothes or video, any of that
Yeah,
stuff?
man, that's a great question. I mean, I've done a lot, and I'm really proud of coming up from like the smaller school levels. I just think it's such a good thing for young coaches to have that experience of coaching or playing at smaller levels. It just makes you appreciate everybody in the building now that, you know, I'm at a higher level. So I've done a lot, from cutting the president's grass at Christopher Newport to try to make some extra money, to shoveling the dog crap out of his yard. But probably one of the most memorable ones, my first year. So I left Christopher Newport for my first like real full-time job at Eastern Illinois. And I was working for Bob Spoo, who's a legend and has passed away, but learned so much from him. But I was in charge of travel, and our first game at Eastern Illinois was at Hawaii. So I'm in charge of travel, and we're flying commercial. We have to bus to O'Hare, and we fly commercial, and I'm helping like the equipment guys get the stuff on the commercial flight. And I mean, it was just mayhem, all the details. And I was coaching, you know, I had special teams, and at the time I was coaching the running backs, special teams, and working all the travel to get our whole party out to Hawaii, including like, you know, the AD and some boosters. And it was a lot. But you know, when you hear like coaches complain about, you know, they don't like the rolls at dinner, you become a little sensitive to that when you're in charge of it, you know.
That's funny. Yeah, especially too. I'm sure I've coached with some guys that are, you know, they smirk at some of the jobs that people have to do. But you're right, it's a real character building. How long did you guys stay at Hawaii when you were at Eastern Illinois? You guys went out there. Did you treat?
Yeah, at Eastern Illinois.
Yeah,
Yeah, we treated it like a bowl game. We left on like a Tuesday, I think, and then flew back on Sunday. Yeah. So and then this year at Vanderbilt, we played at Hawaii. So that was, I got to go back out there for the second time, and hadn't been there 15 years or whatever.
yeah, that's pretty sweet, man. Especially some of the experiences that you get. And this is kind of another side tangent, but people always say, you know, isn't that going to be tough if you have a family and kids? And I've heard some coaches say, yeah, but they get experiences that no other kid will ever get.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things that somebody said to me years ago, which is really true to me, is when you're a coach, like you don't have a lot of hobbies. You know, it's hard to have a lot of hobbies or like kind of side things that you're involved in. So, for example, like a lot of my buddies that I went to college with that are doing different things, they may belong to a country club and they golf, or you know, they go on hunting and fishing trips, or they're in a softball league. Like I don't do those things, you know. So when I have time off, it's with the family, you know, and that's pretty much 100% of the time. So at the end of the day, it kind of equals out, you know, the time that you have with your family. And yeah, and getting back to your point, yeah, my kids have had awesome experiences. And you know, I think one of the best things is when I was a head coach, them being able to ride on the front of the bus with me and go on, you know, on trips. And even those trips weren't maybe as glamorous as you know, playing at Georgia or playing at Hawaii. Playing at Slippery Rock's a little bit different, but you know, it still felt great, man, having them on the front of the bus and being able to be like right in the middle of it.
Well, I think even that experience is cooler too, because from a young age, they learn all these, like, just being a college football fan, they learn different parts of college football that a lot of people have never seen. You know, they know about their favorite players actually on, Edinboro or,
Yeah, right.
you know, some small school. And then as they grow up, and of course you move up and you're moving all the way up, they're fans of that too. So
Yeah, for sure.
that's really cool. All right, so real quick, take us through your background, a little bit of brief overview. When you were a bone crushing defensive back at Bucknell, you recovered a fumble. That was one of your high points, you said, and then also a low point. But what was that experience like in general at Bucknell during the 97 to 2000? I didn't mean to date you on that, but
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. Awesome experience. You know, and so blessed looking back on that. Really got me into I'm not one of the guys that like grew up saying I'm going to be a coach someday. You know, I thought when I first got to Bucknell, I'd be a doctor, and just kind of fell in love with football. And that's because of the coaches that I had. And man, I was blessed to have some great coaches. So on that staff, my head coach was a guy named Tom Gadd, who had been a great Power 5 defensive coordinator. He was South Carolina defensive coordinator, Minnesota, Utah. So learned a ton from him, but also Dave Katalski, who was a defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt, had coached at Stanford. Derek Mason, the previous head coach at Vanderbilt, was on that staff. John Fossil, who's in the NFL. Joe Lombardi, who's an offensive coordinator in the NFL now. I mean, it's just a long list. I can keep going down the line of great guys. Norris Wilson was the head coach at Columbia. So I was just blessed to have all these great guys around, and made me fall in love with football. And my head coach kind of got me into coaching. And then really one of my biggest mentors is a guy named Dave Legg, who was my position coach. And Coach Legg left my senior year when I was done playing to go to Christopher Newport, and called me and said, "Hey, you want to get into coaching? You can coach the DBs by yourself right away." Because he knew that all I knew was what he taught me. And I just had a great opportunity to kind of be a GA, but also be a full-time kind of coach right away. And that got it going. And, did the Christopher Newport thing, and then Villanova for a year, Eastern Illinois, Louisiana Lafayette, Ball State, head coach at Edinboro, Syracuse, and now Vanderbilt. So we bounced around. Kids have lived all over the place. But, I think, bouncing around, there's so much value in that. You don't want to be the guy that's just bouncing around every year. And I try not to do that. But there is a lot of value in being around so many different coaches and so many different head coaches. To go back to the point that we mentioned earlier, when you're trying to develop your own philosophy and you're around all these guys with different backgrounds, whether it's their offensive coaches or defensive head coaches and guys that have learned from other people, you're just stealing so much knowledge. And that's been great for me. And I really value that.
That aspect is pretty cool. And I've gotten to see a little bit of that too. But man, that's such an awesome staff that you were under. There was a conversation you said you had with your dad where, he had been, he talked you out of becoming the next, sales rep at Dick's Sporting Goods. How did that transpire?
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, I majored in English and history, and I had a lot of things that were, that I was pursuing. I was thinking about law school. I was thinking about, getting into the business world. So I started going on some business interviews, and, was offered a job with Dick's in like an executive kind of a leadership program where they kind of bring you up. You start out in sales, then you get into marketing, and I thought that would be kind of a neat thing to try to do. And I just remember I went back to my dad and I said, I think I'm going to take this job at Dick's. And but I also got this football thing with my position coach that I'm considering. And he's like, "So you're going to sell clothes for a living, huh?" And he kind of made me feel bad about it. And I said, "You know what? Let me just give this football thing a try. And if I do it for a year and I like it, maybe it'll turn into something." So that's kind of how it all started for me.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. Yep.
Then, and he had spent time as a D3 coach for 15 or so years.
Yeah, he's a really unique story. He actually he's an orthopedic surgeon who, when I was in high school, he was always coaching like on the side. He had coached at General McLean High School, which is a small school in Pennsylvania outside of the city I grew up in, when I was a kid. And then when I got to high school, he became our defensive coordinator. And then when I was in college, about halfway through college, he quit being a doctor to take like a $25,000 a year job at Allegheny College, as a linebacker coach at Allegheny. And so he was a full-time D3 coach when I was in college, and his example certainly played a huge role in my decision making throughout my entire life, but certainly at that point when I decided to become a coach.
Sure. And also it shows you that it's not about the money, right? I mean, so many guys are in it and they're just chasing. I mean, I still feel like I haven't made a single dollar in this thing, but I do know, and talking to others like yourself, it's like, hey, if you're passionate about what you do, like it's all going to work out and you're going to be fulfilled and happy coaching.
For sure. I mean, that's so key. And, and as old as I am now, the game has changed so much. I mean, I didn't get into it thinking I was going to make a ton of money. And it's obviously it's changed quite a bit over the years. And, but yeah, I mean, the passion of doing it. And I think you see, you know, where that shows up to me a lot is like camps. You know, when you see coaches coaching at like it could be a youth camp or it could be a prospect camp, but the guys that are really coaching their butts off and trying to make kids better, even though you are evaluating too, those are the guys that I want to be around, that are passionate, that love it, and they're just getting after it because they really enjoy doing it.
Sure, and that's how a lot of young coaches get spotted, right? Is coaching their butts off at those camps. And
for sure.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Okay, so you kind of bounced around. We talked about the reason why I brought up that EIU trip is that was like one of my first games. I grad transferred from a school in Pennsylvania, to UT Martin, who's in the OVC, and one of the first games was Hawaii, and it was one of those deals where it's like we're out in West Tennessee, so there's no freaking airports anywhere around there.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm sure you've been out there.
Oh yeah.
And so we take the bus from Tennessee Martin at like whatever 5 at night, maybe. I think we flew like all night. Drove to Nashville, got a flight in Nashville. Nashville flew to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Okay? And then we make the 8 hour. We're like, we're going away from Hawaii. What are we doing here?
Yeah, right.
That whole trip was so cool because it was, you know, I was a D2 guy. I saw myself as a small school guy, and that was our bowl game. You get to play in the, you know, where they had or used to have the Pro Bowl. And
we ran into a buzzsaw there in Hawaii when we played them. It was like, I don't know if you remember Colt Brennan and some of those great teams.
Yeah. Those were those teams, huh?
Yeah. June Jones was the head coach. And I mean, they had an all-star staff too. I'm going blank on some of the names, but man, they had some legends on that staff.
Yep. I remember that for sure because I grew up in Fresno, California, and Fresno State fan. So there was an intense rivalry, and we thought we were supposed to be that team, that Boise State, and it was always Hawaii who would trip them up, or Hawaii. That around that season is when they went to the Sugar Bowl, right?
Yeah. Yep. Played Georgia. Yep.
So, man, that's really cool. So, okay, so kind of transitioning now into, you know, I really do want to bring up too, Coach, that at Ball State you got to learn under a legendary coach, Pete Lembo.
Yeah.
The special teams world, and I'm sure you learned a lot of lessons there. And he respected you so much you became the associate head coach or the assistant coach.
Yeah.
What did you learn from him, and you know, what did that mean to be, you know, the assistant or the associate head coach like you are now?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great experience, man. Coach Lembo is awesome. One of the best, you know, just managers of just organized, smart, just does a really good job of staying on details as a head coach. So I learned that from him. And, you know, and then it kind of progressed as I got that title. You know, I got the opportunity to, you know, do things like hire some smaller positions on the staff, you know, the assistant football ops position. I remember some GA jobs. I think that's one of the things that really stood out is him giving me some authority to help hire some members of his staff. And then, you know, it really just becomes, I think it's really become this role on most of my stops with the assistant head coach title, really being a sounding board for the head coach, just somebody that he can pull in. And when he's got to make big decisions, he's got somebody that he can lean on and bounce ideas off of. And it certainly started at Ball State. And it's something I take a lot of pride in. You know, here, one of the responsibilities we have is helping the younger coaches develop. So we do an off-season thing with all of our younger coaches on our staff where we do mock interviews, and we just do things to try to advance their careers and make them better coaches.
And that's huge. A lot of places, you know, from bouncing around don't do that. So taking that ownership of your coaches on staff is a really cool aspect. So kind of when you go into that special teams coordinator world and you've been there for a long time, you know, and you've bounced around at different places, which is great. How do you get those guys, though you're a first year coordinator or you're a coordinator at a new spot for the first time? How do you get those guys to buy in or even trust you, you know, because you're entirely a new face with a new staff?
Yeah, I think that's always the challenge. Number one, I would say be yourself. Like, I think that's critical is, I mean, it's like building any relationship with anybody, you know, in order for them to trust you, you got to make sure that they feel your authenticity, being who you are. So I think that's really important. Obviously we do a lot, and we probably could spend a whole podcast on, you know, how to make special teams important from things that you share with your players. The other key thing I think is just making sure the head coach is bought in to the importance of it. I mean, we all know how critical that is. The more he's in meetings, the more he's in team settings, showing some special teams clips. But I think that can be driven by the special teams coordinator, making sure that you're going into his office like, hey, coach, man, can you show these 2 clips? And here's what I'd like you to say, to try to drive the importance of it. And then getting the staff to buy in as well. And, hey, maybe in a staff meeting, telling the position coaches, hey, can you mention this in your meeting about this guy who's like really showing up on special teams? I think that helps a lot too. But yeah, in terms of gaining trust in the beginning, I think it's just showing consistency and showing authenticity, as kind of as broad as that sounds. I think that's the key thing.
No, I definitely see that too. And I hadn't really thought from that perspective. A lot of times when you're a young coach, you're just like, all right, head coach believes what he believes, and like, we're just going to ride with it, right? Or whatever he says goes. But I can see, especially when you built a good relationship with your head coach, bringing up certain points, and especially special teams coordinator. I respect all special teams coordinators, because you're essentially, regardless if you have the title or not, you're the second head coach. You're speaking to them every day, and that time you get with them is super important. That's one thing I've learned. So
yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing that in terms of being a good assistant coach, I think this goes for all positions, but especially a special teams coordinator, because you're speaking in front of the whole team, is doing a great job of echoing the message of the head coach. So obviously whatever his message is to the team that day or that week, or just broad picture things, that you're constantly echoing that message and re-emphasizing the things that he believes in. And I think I learned that, especially when I was a head coach, is how important that is, man. If I can get the assistant coaches to speak the way that I'm speaking, use the language that I'm using, to just emphasize the things that are important to me.
Yeah. I thought about that a lot too, thinking, hey, when I become a coordinator, I mean, what's the best way to get the assistants to jump on? Do I take them all out to lunch every day, just one after another, like just keep buying them stuff? Or,
Right.
is it, I'm sure it has something to do with building relationships.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think, there's an old saying, like, to have influence on people, you got to have 2 things. You got to be proficient at what you do. You got to be good at what you do, but you also got to be likable. And, just popping into guys' offices and not being a jerk about it, but hey, man, can you help me with this? I really appreciate it. And, but yeah, getting those assistants to buy in is a critical part of having success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I see that too with a few of the staffs I've been on. I mean, it seems like everyone, and you talked about this briefly when you did that Vanderbilt show, might have been a year or 2 ago, but having the staff and the players know these are the coaching points, or, when your staff, I realize when your staff knows how the drills are supposed to run and what the coaching points are, I mean, that makes everything so much more smooth. It's tough when it's a new staff.
For sure. And I think, like, the older you get and the older I've gotten, we've kind of fine-tuned everything with our drills and our language being a really important one. Like, I want guys saying the things the exact way that I'm saying them. I mean, you can say come to balance, you can say press down, you can say get in a football position. I mean, you can explain that. You can go speed to power, right? Like, there's all these different ways to shorten your stride and get in a football position. But if you're throwing out all these different words constantly, it's hard for the players to learn. And that language piece is really important to me.
Yeah. So how do you get that? Do you meet with them in the off season? Does you guys meet as a staff and talk about, hey, this is how we're going to say it?
Yeah, we meet in the off season. Usually it's like, I'll go to the head coach, and usually it's like a week or 2 before spring ball and a week or 2 before camp. And then we usually have like 2 days where we just grind it out and go through all the drills and the language. And, the beautiful thing is when you have a staff that's been together, and those meetings, instead of being 2 days, can end up being just a half a day, because they're used to it. But yeah, that's how we've done it. And the one thing that, as I've progressed and gotten onto some of these bigger staffs with all the QCs and GAs, I've really leaned on the younger guys, that are maybe a little bit hungrier, and I've kind of sold them on the fact that, like, this is an opportunity for you to really coach a position. instead of having the receiver coach the gunners, maybe it's the receiver GA that's in charge of it. And, maybe allowing him to have some position meetings during camp with those gunners, gives him an opportunity to kind of show what he can do.
Sure. That's awesome. I never really thought about that. And then just kind of let the special teams GA, right, or whoever kind of run the scout team, huh? Because sometimes these guys will help out. But yeah, that's
for sure.
Make them feel important, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
What about for specialists? I mean, you've been around those weird guys. I was a specialist. You've been around them for forever. You talk about creating opportunities for them, and I've heard you kind of talk about this before. But what are some ways you give them responsibility or ownership when it comes to not just their kicking but special teams?
Yeah, one of the things that we picked up, I believe we picked this up from, I think it was a guy from Stanford. But years ago, we started giving the specialists game day duties. So they all have books on the sideline. And instead of having the GAs and QCs who are usually, overwhelmed with their offense and defensive duties, we'll have like the backup punter will be charting the opponent punter during the game. And the backup long snapper, his eyes are on the long snapper the entire game and maybe charting his snaps. And there might be a backup kicker who's helping us with personnel on kickoff, and he's just checking to make sure it's the same guys every single time. So giving those guys game day duties, especially when they're not playing a lot, the backup guys especially, has been a fun thing for us. That's given them a little bit more ownership in the results of the game. So that's been one of the main things that has been good for us.
Yeah, I like that. And that's what we started doing at Marshall. And do you guys do anything different from a practice perspective? I've been to the fields there after living in the Nashville area, and you guys got a few fields out there. What do you like to do with them at practice? Obviously, you're working with tight ends too, but is there something different you like to do with them at practice, or any competitions, any games?
I don't think there's anything that's real different. One of the things that we've done over the last probably 5 or 6 years is try to designate team periods that we'll try to simulate more of a game style rep. So it could be, I thought we did a nice job of that this year with like pin punts. We put an emphasis on that during camp. And so we would designate maybe 2 periods and team periods, especially like if you're driving the ball, where, if the ones are done with their rack of reps, maybe we'll finish with a pin, and we'll the punter and the long snapper and maybe a gunner, and they might compete against a couple jammers. But you'll do kind of a rep within the team period. So the punters and kickers have to just get used to not, it's a punt period and you're going 10 minutes straight of punts, but that's not realistic, right? Like they got to be able to warm up on the sideline, jog out onto the field, execute 1 rep, and maybe not have another rep for another 10 minutes. So I think simulating those situations in game or in practice is critical and has helped us a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Actually, when I got to Davis, this is the first time I've ever seen anything like that. Really, we call them inserts, but throw some gunners out there. Sometimes maybe even throw a corner, make them work releases, and then work on down in because that's so important. If you can win the red zone battle or the pin punt battle, I think that's really cool. I get jacked up about that. Did it translate in the game? Do you think you guys
did? Yeah, the pins we made significant improvement on those this year, so that was good for us. And the other thing that we've done is like not only will we do just like maybe the battery, the long snapper and the punter, but we'll also sometimes just have the whole punt unit take a rep on air in the middle of those team periods, which is good too, because I think those guys, you got to get them to focus. The offense just goes 3 and out, and your 2 of your receivers and a running back are on the punt team, and they got to refocus. And maybe they made a mistake on that 3rd down play, and they got to wipe that out of their head and refocus on that punt play. We talk about one-shot mentality all the time, but you got to train it. You got to do it in practice. And again, if you're just doing the punt period 10 minutes straight, and those guys are getting 5 or 6 reps in a row, it's a little bit different than having to, clear your mind from the previous offensive play and then go out there and execute on one play on punt.
No question. What's that? Just like you said, one-shot mentality, right? Be able to lock in and focus. I'm assuming that's.
Yeah, for sure.
That is awesome. Well, hey, Coach, I appreciate it. I've been throwing you a ton of different things and a great sport about it. We're kind of wrapping up here, but we do a rapid fire section at the end.
Okay.
So this section is you don't have to get too into detail, all right, but you can tell me what these things mean to you, and I'll kind of throw some questions at you. That sound good?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. This one, and this is a little bit longer just because it's at the start, but I've always wondered about this, and you can tell me in-game adjustments. Essentially, when you have a kickoff or a kickoff return, you almost always have a timeout. I think that's Mike Westhoff who talked about having, always a play. Do you use that to your advantage, or do you do things with that? Sometimes you get a TV timeout, 2 minutes 30 seconds.
Sure.
What do you do with in-game adjustments?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my maybe one of my favorite things is being able to adjust during the game. And I think it's one of the most rewarding things when you can make adjustments in the game and create an advantage. So yes, we certainly do that. I think a lot of it's just communicating with the players, especially when you got some older veteran guys. I like to give them some freedom on, for example, we've got like on kickoff return, two guys that have been working the double team for us for the last 2 years. And we've given them like 3 or 4 different tools on different types of double teams. So it might be, hey, we're struggling with, the vice double team at the 30, we're going to jump them right away, so those are the kind of conversations that we'll have. Or like, I talk a lot on like in our Friday meetings of like the players, you guys got to talk to me, and that's the time where they should be talking to me. I'm struggling blocking 32. Coach, he's a demon, he's a beast. All right, well, let's change up the scheme a little bit. We're going to bring an MDM player off the backside just to help you out. And once you whiff, just climb to the safety, so those types of adjustments, yeah, those are some of my favorite parts of game day. And we certainly use that time. And we've also, we've got some auxiliary returns and auxiliary kickoff schemes that maybe you didn't practice a whole lot during the week, drawn up in a book that, I think a lot of people do that, where you can go to that in mid game and just go over the drawings with the guys in the huddle and say, hey, we're going to try this return that we haven't practiced, but we'll give it a shot on this one.
I love that. Giving the coach or the players too that ownership to say, hey, this isn't working, let's do this. It's good stuff.
For sure.
All right, any proverbs or coachisms? I heard you say a few, and I know you're kind of like, that's coach speak or whatever, but I think really good coaches always have some really good ones, and it always sticks in my brain. You got any good ones that you like repeating?
Yeah, man, I think that's one of the things I really enjoy, and I make the players kind of repeat a lot of things to me. So we've got a lot of them, man. Like I say, control the hip. The players say control the soul. Sometimes the best block is, and they all say no block. I think everybody's, probably done that one. Another quote that I use quite a bit in kind of my philosophy. I mean, I really believe in repetition. So there's an old Bruce Lee quote. I fear not the man who has practiced 10,000 kicks one time, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. I love that one. So yeah, I mean, I love that stuff, man. We could talk for days on some of those.
We'll get into some of that stuff later. Yeah. I love that though. That's, as a young coach, I'm like, man, I want to take a book of coachisms and just read it and repeat
for sure.
it.
Yeah, for sure.
There's a lot of wisdom there. All right. You said there was one player, NFL player, that looks like an avatar. Who is it?
Oh man, on our team now, or
now that you faced in the past? And
okay. Derwin James.
It was actually Trevor Lawrence.
And Trevor Lawrence for sure looks that way. And I don't know that Derwin James looks that way, but man, he there's 2 names that pop into my head. Bob Sanders. Do you know who that is?
Yes, I heard that.
So Bob Sanders and I went to high school together. He was actually closer to my brother's age, but he just always was like just this, and he's only like 5'8", but he's 5'8" and just rocked up, and one of my favorite football players of all time. How physical he played, the way he played the game, with such passion and toughness, and made such a difference on his team when he was on the field. And then Derwin James, like at Syracuse, we lost to Florida State one year at Florida State, and I swear he single-handedly changed the game in really 2 phases, defense and special teams. And that guy, I remember a couple of my NFL buddies were calling me, asking me about him. I'm like, take that guy, man. He's
It's
gonna
a real
be
deal.
a difference maker.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought of that too. Now when I'm doing scouting reports or something, trying to describe a player, I might say he's like an avatar. Just
Yeah,
your athletic ability and just being around the field all the time,
yeah,
or yeah, being an animal. I love that. Okay. And you kind of talked about this before, but old favorite players that you've coached or anyone that you've coached against,
yeah.
distinguished.
Zaire Franklin's a guy that pops into my mind right away. Zaire was a linebacker for us at Syracuse. When I got to Syracuse, he was, I believe, a junior. He's one of the only 3-time captains at Syracuse. Is currently one of the leading tacklers for the Colts right now. But a guy that just got everything out of his ability, and a guy that he was a senior 4-year starter at Syracuse at linebacker and was still sitting in the special teams meeting in the front row, right in the middle, right in front of me, totally locked in, taking notes in every meeting, and just one of the best guys I've ever been around, just a professional when he was in college. And it's not surprising that, I think I'm not sure if he got drafted. I think he went as a free agent, but now he's having a really successful career with the Colts. And I bring him up a lot in our special teams meetings to our players on what an example he has set as just a true pro. And he's the kind of guy where you take him off a kickoff and he's pissed off. He wants to be on the field every single play.
And that's one of those things the measurables don't show, right? Is that
for sure.
That so that's pretty cool that he's had that type of career and had that much success. All right, here's my last one for you, and I think this is cool because you've been around, you've done it a lot. What's one of the biggest mistakes that coaches make when they end up in a new program or a new place that you've seen?
Wow, that's interesting. One of the biggest mistakes. I mean, I'm going to go back to this probably is just the authenticity piece. Like, and there's two things. Number one, you got to be like yourself, man. Like don't try to, even if the head coach, you have to buy into what he's doing and what he's preaching, but you got to do it with your own lens and you got to be yourself still. And I just have been around some guys where, I think try to be what the head coach wants or try to be what he thinks the players want. And, it's so easy to spot that, and being true to yourself and being true to what you believe in is just so valuable. And I know that's maybe doesn't sound that important, but I think it is. And I've seen that mistake made by some people.
No, I think just like you said there, like putting it in your own lens or your own voice, right? But still being yourself. There's a lot of validity to that. So, all right, Coach. Well, hey, I appreciate the time. I know you're a busy man. One more thing. I know you said on a couple of talks that you go walking with your wife and you say, hey, this team's going to be really good and they suck.
Yeah.
Or you say, hey, this team's going to be, terrible and they're really good. So what do you think the walk's going to be like this year? How are you feeling? I know it's so early in the recruiting class and all that stuff, but how are you feeling on the walk and what is it going to be like for this year's Vandy team?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I mean, first off, I think I'm like a lot of coaches, always like, we got to get better and, feeling like you stink all the time because there's so much room for improvement. But I will say being here at Vanderbilt and working for Clark Lee is one of the best I've ever been around. I truly believe in what we're building here and how we're building it. And I have so much confidence in what he's doing, and it's exciting. And it's a place where, the guys are bought in and it's a true team atmosphere. There's we talk about true brotherhood here, and that exists. And I think that's harder and harder to exist at a lot of places. So because of that, man, I'm super excited about this season coming up. And I think, if you look at the progress we've made over the last 2 years, we're trending in the right direction, and we're bringing, good players in here, but not only good players, but players that are a good fit for us, and staff members that are good fits for us. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be here. And, putting a lot of money into the facilities too, which, obviously is good for recruiting, but what it really, to me, says is the support of the administration. And so everything seems to starting to align for us here, and we're excited about the future.
Yeah, it's sweet. And I do have noticed that you guys, the climb has been steady and consistent. Coach Lee sounds like an awesome person. So as Nashville being my second home, I'm rooting for you guys and pulling for you guys to be successful. So
well, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, well, appreciate you, Coach. That's been Coach Justin Lustig, assistant head coach and special teams coordinator, the Vanderbilt Commodores.
A word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by The Kicker's Bible. The Kicker's Bible. Ever wondered about how many kicks you should do during practice after pulling your quad multiple times? Repeatedly snapping the ball over your punter's head? Keep getting dumped by all your girlfriends for missing kicks? Well, we can't help with all those things. But for some of those, there's The Kicker's Bible. Proven training methods and secrets used by NFL specialists, written by yours truly, Brett Arkelian, with over 20 NFL specialist accounts, including personal excerpts from record-setting and Hall of Fame specialists David Akers and Shane Graham. If you are interested in any of these fantastic tips and excerpts discussed in this episode, visit IcemanKicking.com or go to my Twitter bio, Iceman_kicking.
Shells are highly prized. And this one is occupied by a sarcastic fringe head.